And a very warm welcome to the podcast. I want to make sure I have the surname correct. Katherine Klimitas. Am I close?
You are.
Wonderful. So, Katherine, let's get this started. Where are you right now on planet Earth?
Right now on planet Earth, I am sitting in my dining room in Metairie, Louisiana, in the United States, which is close to New Orleans.
Cool.
So
So, if you were to go to give somebody some sort of kind of insight of your area, what would you say to sell it? If I was going to come there on holiday or to live, what would you say to me to really get me motivated to move there?
this is the place to eat. We have
Okay.
some really good food.
So
Yeah.
what type of food, Catherine? Give me some inside knowledge. What type of food are we talking about?
We have a lot of seafood because
Okay.
we're right on the Gulf of Mexico. So we have a lot of fresh fish and shrimp and crawfish. Right now it's crawfish season. So like we're having crawfish boils a lot of weekends. And yeah, it's just New Orleans is known for its food. So and its music. We're also the birthplace of jazz. So we have a lot of jazz music, a lot of small venues that you can go and hear some really great music. So yeah, New Orleans is always fun. There's always
Cool.
something going on. Yeah.
And what would be your kind of your food to go, so to speak? What would you enjoy
Oh,
the most?
there's so many choices. My mom's family is Cajun, and so I'm partial to that type of food. So like boiled seafood and jambalaya and gumbo and etouffee, all those kinds of things. We love all that here.
Cool. And for temperature wise, to make an Irishman jealous today, are we heating up?
It's a little cooler here today, which I mean, it's not cold. It's like 65. But we have been hitting 80
Oh
the
wow.
last couple of days Fahrenheit because we're in the United States. But yeah, so we have been hitting 80 the last few days, but it's supposed to get down into the 40s tonight, I believe, and tomorrow, and then it's going to heat back up again. This is our time of year where it's like one day it's winter and one day it's summer, and we never. Yeah, yeah.
So how do you manage that then? I mean, do you ever kind of become acclimatized or is it just a part of
So
keeping hydrated?
it's hard. It's frustrating because everybody gets sick, because the constant weather change makes everybody get sick, and it's just, I mean, like today is beautiful. It's like probably about 70 now outside, and it's not a cloud in the sky. It's gorgeous today. But last weekend we had tornadoes and massive rain. So
Right.
you just never know. And then in January, no, February, we had a freeze. I mean, we had 12 inches of snow, which we have not gotten since 18, I think they said it was like 1898 or something. I mean, some ridiculous amount of time.
Right.
So, yeah, it's been a very weird weather year. Very weird. We're just hoping for no hurricanes.
Okay, we'll
That's
say nothing. We'll stay positive, we will.
yeah.
So I'll let the listeners know a little bit more about yourself in the introduction. So can you tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself? I mean, go all the way back as far as you want to go. Make it as
Okay.
exciting as you possibly can, Catherine.
Oh boy, exciting. Okay. Well, I've lived in New Orleans or outside of New Orleans basically my entire life. So I don't technically I was born in the north, but I do not I do not consider myself a northerner because we moved here when I was 8 months old to be
Okay.
close to my mom's family. And my parents were both veterinarians. So I grew up, it's interesting to grow up in a veterinary office. I grew up with dogs and cats and basically every type of animal you could possibly imagine as a pet. Because my dad believed that if you were going to treat them, you should own them. And
Okay.
so we didn't necessarily have every pet for a long time. Like we got a couple of snakes once, and they got so big that they had to eat rabbits. And he said, "Okay, it's time for you to find a new home." At
Right.
that point, you know, but he had them so that he could gain experience one-on-one experience with them for when, a client walked in to the office with one. So we had all kinds of pets, and I would spend a lot of time at their clinic on the weekends when I was a kid. So things don't gross me out generally. It's, you see it all at a vet clinic. But one thing that is interesting about me is that I have a bone disease called osteogenesis imperfecta, which is also known as brittle bone disease. I have type 3, and I'm a severe type 3, which is, it basically means my bones break really easily and they grow abnormally. So I am actually only 2'7", and I use a motorized wheelchair to get around. And yeah, I mean, I by the time I was 10, I had broken 500 bones or bones 500 times. So we stopped counting around that time. But yeah, that was a little bit of a challenge to grow up with that. Um, it people ask me like, how does that affect you? I mean, it affects everything. It affects everything I do and the way I do everything. So I grew up having to learn how to adapt the world around me into one that I can live in,
Right.
basically. Um, and with that, my parents were always trying to find things that I could do because I was really smart, and I just couldn't move like a normal kid. So one day, my mom gave me a watercolor set when I was about 5, and I got really into it. And it was just a cheap, you know, crappy watercolor set that you get a 5 year
Poor,
old,
poor
right?
mom. Poor
Yeah,
mom.
I mean, a terrible watercolor set. But I went through it really fast, and she realized that I enjoyed it, and that I mean, for a 5 year old, I was pretty good at it. And I got to graduate into a much nicer watercolor set,
Okay.
not too long from then. Um, and yeah, so I would I mean, I would paint things at my house, but I would also sit in my parents' waiting room at their office and paint their clients.
Right.
And, while they were waiting, and just for fun, just because I was bored, because I was always bored and I was driving my parents crazy. So that's why they were always trying to find something for me to do. And so after a few weekends of doing this, clients would pay me to do it, like without me asking. They would just say, "Oh, here's $20. Can you paint my dog?" Or "Here's some pictures of my dog. Can you paint it from this or whatever?" And so I started doing pet portraits, not really on purpose, just because it kind of fell into my lap.
Right.
And so obviously over the years, my style has evolved. I have had education and I've gotten much better. And so that's a big part of what I do today is pet portraits. But yeah, so I grew up in mainstream schools. I don't know what it's like in Ireland, but here, if if you're in a wheelchair, a lot of times the school system wants to put you into special ed,
Right.
and special ed is mostly for people with mental disabilities here.
Okay.
Um, Now, I mean, I that's not where I belong. Like that's I would have been bored to death. Like that just would not have worked for me, and I wouldn't have gotten the social interactions with kids my own age that I needed, to become a actual functioning adult, right?
Yes.
And so my parents put me in a very small private school. I think there were maybe 230 kids in the whole school, kindergarten, eighth grade, and it was very family oriented, very accommodating. All the teachers were wonderful. And so I grew up in that school, and then I went to an advanced high school after that, and also very accommodating, bigger, but very accommodating, and then college after that. So I have a bachelor's degree in graphic design, and today I work from home and I run my own art and design business. So that's me in a nutshell.
You,
It's
you,
a big
you're
nutshell.
My word, you have filled in so much. I mean, in such a short space of time. You're obviously somebody that likes to drive forward in life
Yeah.
and has great determination. I mean, do you think before we kind of go back a little bit, do you think like was there tough love from mommy and daddy?
Oh God, from mom for sure. Dad, not so much. I mean, dads and daughters, right? I mean,
Daddy's girl. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, he passed away several years ago, but
I'm sorry.
I, yeah, I had him pretty much wrapped. If I couldn't get something out of mom, I could almost always get it out of dad. Um, like I never went to mom to sign a bad grade, you know,
Right,
because it would have killed me. But dad would sign it and say, okay, now if I don't tell your mom, what are you going to give me for it? And then
right.
we'd make a deal. And then, and of course I would bring my grade up. Like I was a really good student. And, he knew that. And he knew that it like bothered me as much as it was probably bothering him that I had a bad grade, so it wasn't that big of a deal. And it didn't happen very often. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I love my mom. She's a very realistic person. She's very driven herself. Both my parents owned their own practices. So
Right.
I grew up, when I was really young, I would say, I think mom split off when I was like 6. Um, Before I was 6, they owned the practice together. And then she opened her own
Right.
after that. And so I mean I grew up watching two people run a business. So like I grew up seeing the back end, the hiring, the firing, the taxes, the paperwork, deposit the money, pay the bills, like all those things. So when I decided to start my own business, it wasn't really that scary because I mean I had been helping do some of it, as I got older. I mean when I was 4, that would have been what, 1993. My dad had me counting 20s in the back,
Okay.
dollar bills. Right now, nobody uses cash anymore, but I mean, at that time, it was all cash,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, yeah, he had me counting stacks of 20s,
Right.
right? So, I mean, from the time I was 4. Um, so yeah, so that wasn't really scary at all. Um, but as far as tough love, yeah, mom is definitely that rule.
And
But
has she
but she's
eased up a
good.
little bit as the years gone by?
Uh, well, I mean, I haven't really given her a reason to have to do it. So, I mean, I'll say yes, but I mean, when you're a teenager, you give them all kinds of reasons to
Yeah.
do it, right? So, um, we live together and we function well together. I'll say that. Like we understand each other's stuff and we're pretty good about splitting responsibilities and um yeah. I mean, I think we do okay.
I'll tell you something, you're a clever woman. Tell me this, when did your parents, your mum and dad, kind of find out that you have brittle bone disease? I mean, how does this all work? I mean, as an ignorant, not an ignorant, but probably a less educated guy like myself, how did they find out?
So osteogenesis imperfecta is a pretty rare condition. Only about 40,000 people in the United States have it. And it varies in severity a lot. And so the people who have my type, which is one of the worst types, it's like the second to the worst type. The people who have my type, there's only like 400 of us in the United States. I mean, it's not a lot, if that. Okay. Um, there are people who have a very, and there, it's actually more common than, it's more common that the less severe is present, but um, they look relatively normal and they can walk and they can move and they don't need a wheelchair, they don't need any kind of assistive devices, they might be a little bit short, They may have a couple of other things, but generally they're pretty normal. However, they break usually around puberty or like as a 5, 6, 7 year old, they break bones randomly. Like, and it's not a lot, it's, somewhere between 2 and 5 randomly. And some, if they're not diagnosed before that, what happens is CPA gets involved because they think, I'm sorry, yeah, no,
Child Protection Agency, yep.
yeah, or CPS, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, they get involved and they say, they say, well, I mean, obviously the parent is beating that child, right? Because the child breaks his wrist and he can't tell her why he broke his wrist or how he broke his wrist, and so that's a real problem. Now that those types are not diagnosed usually ahead of time. My type was, it was 2 weeks ahead of when I was born, because they could see it on x-ray.
Right.
Like they could see bones broken in utero. But for type ones, the less severe type, they don't break in utero. So unless like there's some kind of massive curvature of the spine or some kind of other bone abnormality or something else to tip doctors off, it's not diagnosed until some kid, the kid breaks the bone randomly. Um, but I was diagnosed 2 weeks before I was born. So my parents found out then, and I had like 11 broken bones or something when I was born. Um, Clearly, I don't remember that.
No.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, so that's common. I mean, I think I remember that was in 1989. So I think now they tend to diagnose a little earlier,
Right.
because they do more imaging ahead of time. But yeah, that's generally how it works.
And what about you mentioned earlier on, but like you've broken 500 bones. I mean, how are we talking a lot of pain here,
Yeah.
or how does it kind of how does it work? I mean, do you have to be very, very careful with your movement even now?
So once you hit puberty, it gets a lot better
Right.
because you get the surge of hormone, your bones get stronger, and that happens to everybody. That happens to all children. It just you see the effect in people with OI. Because when I was young, I mean, I could just turn the wrong way and break a rib or something or break anything. I still break ribs when I cough a lot. So like for me to get sick is really miserable because when I cough, I break ribs and then I don't want to cough because it hurts. And then I end up with pneumonia, which I need to cough more and more. I mean, it's not a good situation. Um, uh,
You kind of make you're very upbeat about the whole thing. I mean,
well,
you're
I
very
mean, it is
good.
what it is. Like it is what it is. Like it's not, this is not something that is curable. I mean, I'm going to have it forever. It is what it is. And yeah, I mean it does hurt a lot, and there are days where I am miserable and cranky, and I just don't want to do anything. And but they're not as often as they were when I was really young. So
Right.
that's the one thing that is kind of a silver lining is that because my bones are not as strong, the way I try to describe it is there's not as much of them there. So there's not as much of them to heal.
Okay.
So for me to break a rib, I can heal a rib in a week, depending on how it's broken.
Wow.
Um, maybe two, but longer bones take longer. I mean, like my legs and my arms, the things that are stronger, they take longer. But yeah, so it's not like every time I break a bone, it's 6 weeks to 2 months and cast and all that. It's not always like that. So
And what about
that's
treatments? I mean, in terms of as the technology or medicines has advanced over the years since you were a small child, I mean, are things getting better, or are we still back in the 80s,
I
70s?
mean, I so I do physical therapy every other week, and I have done that since I was basically born. So that's one thing I do. I swim, and that really helps. Um, because it I can move well in the water. I can actually walk in the water. And so I can breathe better in the water. It helps you open your lungs. I mean, swimming is an excellent exercise. And it also takes gravity, the pull of gravity off my joints because OI is a collagen problem. So collagen is the stuff basically that makes up your whole body.
Yeah.
It's not the stuff you inject into your lips. It's in your hair, it's in your bones, it's in your muscle, it's in your organ tissue, it's in your nails, it's in everything. And so for me, my ligaments are just as susceptible to damage as my bones are. And ligament tears are much harder to heal than a bone. I would much rather break a bone than tear a ligament. But but yeah, so I do that. My mom is a natural veterinarian. She does a lot of holistic medicine and homeopathy. So I try to not do a whole lot of um, like narcotic type drugs. I mean, I rarely. And when I say rarely, I mean every 3 to 5 years. If I have a bad injury,
Right.
something, then maybe I'll take a narcotic. But on a daily basis, I try to just stick with natural stuff. If I'm really hurting, Motrin is a great option. And then Excedrin is good too. But that's about as far as I go. I use hot packs, like those beanbag rice hot packs. Those help me a lot because if my muscles spasm too hard, they can actually break my bones. So if I'm having some kind of spasm for some reason, that helps calm it down. I have a lotion that's kind of like BioFreeze, but it's not. That helps some. Um, yeah, I mean, I just try not. I try not to overstress my body. I try to just make sure I'm not doing too many things in a row where I'm leaving myself open for either getting sick or breaking something. So,
What's your typical day, Catherine, from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to bed? I mean,
uh,
do you follow a routine now that you kind of just?
kind of, kind of. So I live with 6 dogs.
Oh, seriously,
So
what type of breeds? I love dogs. What type of
I
breed?
have all kinds of dogs. We have an Italian Greyhound.
Okay.
We have a Papillon Pomeranian mix. We have a toy Aussie. She's very cute, but she's very fat. And we have a Labradoodle, who's we kind of inherited from my grandmother. She's 16 and a half, so she's kind of a hospice
Right.
situation. And then we have two McNabb Shepherds, which is kind of like um, it's kind of like a short-haired border collie.
Okay.
Very smart, both very well. One is definitely smarter than the other, but still both very smart. Um, and there are two young dogs, so they're a lot. Actually at the office with mom today
Right.
because they're very loud. So one of them sleeps with me. Usually in the morning, mom gets up. I wish everybody probably in the neighborhood hears. And um, she feeds the dogs breakfast. The McNabb gets out of my bed and goes and eats breakfast. And then the Italian Greyhound eats breakfast and comes back and gets in my bed and goes back to sleep, which I try to do also for an hour or so. And then my aide gets here. I get up. I usually have checked my email already on my phone, just to see like what my clients are doing for the day and what I need to have done and whatever. I will either bathe right away, depending on what I have going on, or I'll get up for a little while and work, get something to eat, work for a little while, and then I'll, swim and bathe or whatever. Um, and then I'll work some more. And sometimes instead of design work, I paint. It just depends on deadlines. I mean, it really is just a priority situation, like who needs what when, you know. Because if I have a client like this week, I've had nothing but print deadlines for
Right.
clients. I mean, they've kind of had to take precedent over paintings, because none of them are due right away. So, yeah,
You're a busy woman.
yeah, it's busy. I'm busy mostly all the time. It's always a problem because I feel like I'm going in a million directions all the time.
Right.
But
Well,
it's
well
all
done,
good.
you. You're keeping yourself ahead of the game and mentally fit. What about, can I just ask with supports and stuff like that? I mean, is did your mum and dad, and even yourself now, I mean, was there any supports available in relation
Uh,
to, maybe a chair that you're going to have to go in, or maybe somebody, as you mentioned, an aide? I mean, or is it dependent on mum and dad?
I mean, when I was growing up, it mostly was dependent on mom and dad.
Right.
There were some support groups, but they, and even now, like when I was growing up, the treatment for this disease is take a handful of narcotics every day.
Right.
I mean, and that's not a great option, you know. I mean, there are Facebook groups where we can get online and talk to each other, and it's amazing how many people will get on there and say I'm on this, this, and this, and I still hurt, and I'm just like, how do you even know your name right now?
Yeah.
I mean, like, how are you even functioning right now? Um, and I think having that alternative view from my mom is really helpful because a lot of these people they don't even think to try something different. Like they're the only option they know of is drugs, and prescription drugs, and it's just not. There, I think there are better ways. At least there are better ways that work for me. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to work for everybody because it won't, you
Yeah.
know. But the other plus side for me is that having my parents as veterinarians, we are able to make splints at home for me when I break. So it's not like I need to go to the doctor every time I break a bone. It's
Right.
very rare that I go to a doctor. I mean, extremely rare. I have a doctor. I have an orthopedist, but there's not a whole lot they can do for me. They're gonna just do the same thing we would do, except they would do an X-ray. But generally speaking, I've been doing this for so long. I know how things break. I know how bad something is when it happens, and so it's not really necessary to do all that. So we make stuff at home, and a lot of people have done that. It's not just me. A lot of people have said, "Yeah, I don't ever want to go to an emergency room because they don't know what to do with me. They have no idea." Um,
How does that
even
make you feel, Catherine? How does that make you feel?
I mean, it would be nice if they could be educated in it, but at the same time, I get why they're not. Again, I grew up with doctors. I mean, they're animal doctors, but they're doctors. And so I understand that, like, there's only so much you can learn about. And so you're obviously going to learn the most about the most common ailments,
Yeah.
right? You're going to, yeah. And so this is not a common ailment. It's just not. And so the hardest thing though is finding an orthopedist that will work with you. I did have a really hard time with that recently because mine retired. I had had him since I was 2, and he was great. He was amazing. We loved him. But he just retired a few years ago, and he was in his 80s. I mean, I understand. It was time for him to retire, but finding someone else who was willing to work with me it took a while. And it's 40 minutes away.
Right.
It's not anywhere near where I live. So yeah, I mean, it's a little frustrating. It's a little frustrating sometimes.
What would you say, Catherine, if I mean to the medical field, what would you say to them? I mean, to try and help you more.
Well, I think in general, um, and I do some talks to physical therapy students and occupational therapy students and even med students, and I kind of say the same thing every time, which is you need to learn the protocols because they're important and they're a good basis, but you've got to learn how to think outside the box because not every patient you see is going to be able to do a protocol. They're just not. Like, for example, the last time I got hurt outside of my house, an ambulance was called, not by us. Somebody else called an ambulance and they wanted to take my blood pressure. Can't do that.
Right.
Can't do that. And they were like, well, we need to see if it's high. And I'm like, trust me, it's high. I have like 5 broken bones right now. Like this is stroking out is not the issue currently at hand.
Right.
you know, so yeah, it's stuff like that, and it's about like how we do my casting. We do it totally different than they do it in the hospital. Um, I prefer to use heat instead of ice when I break something because usually for me it's more about relaxing the muscles than cutting down the inflammation. Um, and people don't understand that. So it's really just not everybody's going to be the same. And I think what the medical field in general is lacking is remembering to treat everybody individually
Right.
because and to treat the whole person. I mean, I know people right now who are going to 2 to 5 different doctors because one of them looks at blood work, one of them looks at your bones, one of them looks at whatever your mental stuff. One of them looks at your kidneys. One of them looks at, and it's like, you don't think all of this is connected somehow into the same person? And nobody does that anymore. Nobody wants to look at the whole person. They just want to specialize into one section. And it doesn't work. It's not a good way to treat people.
Is I mean the equipment that you need, or even the chair. I mean, are we talking? Is it a lot of money?
Oh, yeah. I just got a new chair. And I am very lucky because my insurance covered almost all of it this time, which is kind of a miracle, actually. But covered almost all of it. And then we have a program here in Louisiana, and I think it's in every state. It's just called something different in every state. But it basically takes federal funding and state funding and helps people with disabilities get the things they need to be in the workforce.
Right.
So you just have to be able, if you're disabled, I mean, A, you have to prove you're disabled. B, you have to prove that you're working. So you just give them your taxes. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. So you just prove that you're earning money and then you talk to them about, okay, this is what I need. And so they picked up the rest of what my insurance did not cover,
And
which is really
what's
great.
the average cost of the chair? An average cost.
Well, I can tell you what was billed to insurance,
Right.
but it's not that. So this chair is the highest I've ever seen. It was 112,000
$112,000.
billed to insurance.
Holy moly. Right.
Now, according to my wheelchair guy, he thinks it's about 55,000.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But of course, you bill insurance more because they never cover, and that's how you get the maximum out of them.
Right.
Yeah, which is a very stupid situation. But yeah.
Are they quite durable, the chairs? I mean, how long would that last?
Well, insurance says I can get a new one every 5 years.
5 years.
My last one lasted 10, almost exactly 10. However, it had a lot of problems those last 5 years. So I mean, if you're not wanting to pay a lot out of pocket to fix them, then yeah, I mean, I would say in really good condition, 5 years, but you can push them longer than that.
Right.
You take care of them. It's like a car. You have to charge it every, however many days, and you get it checked every year, and change the tires on it, and you don't leave it out in the rain. I mean, all those kinds of things.
Do you ever get sick of talking about it? I mean, do you ever kind of wake up and kind of say, "Oh, I've just had enough of talking about this."
No, I mean, when I went through a stage when I was, I don't know, it might have been my early 20s or my late teens, where I was like, I want people to like my art just for my art, and
Yeah.
not because I have a disability. But I have a really good friend who's significantly older than I am. I mean, she's in her 80s, and she said, you need to use what you got. Like, everybody needs to just use what they have. She's like, it's like when women wear short skirts because they need to get a job. She's like, you use what you got, which I have a feeling she probably did as a younger woman. Um, but but she's like, and it's part of who you are. And I mean, it is. It doesn't necessarily dictate everything in my life, but it definitely plays a part, you
Right.
know. And so yeah, so I just started kind of leaning into that, and it's good because I think the more I can spread my story and my message and whatever, the less ignorant people will be,
Yeah.
which is really nice because there are some really ignorant people out there.
But that leads us in then, Catherine. So, in terms of ignorant, what really gets at you from just a general society or the general public of how they interact with you on a daily basis, or what really gets you're just,
um, I really hate it when adults stare. That
okay,
really bothers me.
right.
I don't mind like kids just don't know, and that's fine. They just haven't had enough experience yet, right? But adults, the way I've started handling it over the last 10 years or so is I just stare back at them. And I'm really good at staring contests.
Oh,
And
I'm gonna give me a stare now, Catherine. Give me your stare. Oh, that's a stare. Yeah, that's not. I
yeah,
won't mess around with you. Yeah.
it's funny because it scares them, and then
Okay.
they don't know what to do. They get really uncomfortable and they have no idea how to get out of the situation. And it
Right.
makes me laugh every time. So it's good. I don't, it bothers me when people, they look at me and they just assume that I'm not a functioning member of society.
Okay.
They're like, I say, yeah, I own my own business. You own a business? You work? How do you work? Well, don't you just live on what the government provides? No, because most of what the government provides is not ideal, you know. Um, so no, and yeah, I think people it goes back to thinking outside the box. Like, just because you're different doesn't mean you can't, you
Sure.
know. And so yeah, I think the more I can talk about my story and people can see me, it'll affect the way they talk to people in public who might be in a wheelchair or who might look different or have some kind of learning disability or whatever. So yeah.
When the public or an individual or a group of individuals approach you, I mean, how would you like them to interact with you to start communication? I mean, should it
It's so
be?
hard.
This is going to sound a bit silly, but do you want them to stay standing up? Do you want them to come down?
Oh yeah. No, it's weird for me when people kneel.
Okay,
Like, I'm so used to people being standing. Like, I don't expect people to change what they're doing because of me.
right.
So it's for me, it's like they're doing something special when they kneel. I know for other people they think it's nice because it's like a sign of respect. For me, it's just weird. Like, you wouldn't kneel down to talk to somebody, like
I
maybe
do
a
that all the
child.
time, Katrin. I do that all the
Yeah. I
time.
mean, unless you're proposing or something.
Oh
I mean,
no.
Yeah. I mean, that's not, yeah. It's just a little weird. And I also think because I have this thing about people think I'm a child, and it does drive me crazy. Even when I have like, I mean, which I don't right now, but a full face of makeup on, and I'm out at like, some kind of music venue or bar or whatever, and that's the kind of clothes I have on. I mean, you wouldn't let your 5-year-old do that, right? And so I think too, for me, when people kneel, I just associate it with being like a child. And
Right.
I mean, that's just a me thing. It's not necessarily what they mean. It's just what I associate it with. And
Well,
I think that's probably why it
you do
bothers me.
have youthful appearance, Catherine, now. You have
Well, thank you.
wonderful youthful looks, so hang on to them as long as you can.
It's
Um,
a filter.
you have a great sense of humor. What about, the art itself? I mean, what challenges? I remember I spoke to a gentleman there a week ago, Ken Kunkin, and he mentioned in relation to sometimes the difficulties of interacting with equipment or because something might be on a higher shelf or how
Mm.
frustrating that might be. How do you manage that even with your art?
Well, part of the reason I do watercolor is because I can do it almost completely independently.
Right.
Because, and I don't work big. In general, I don't go bigger than a 9 by 12. Um, every once in a while, I'll do a 12 by 18 every once in a while. And I usually hate myself every time I do it. But, but, uh, but yeah, so I mean, watercolor, it's a very neat medium. You're not like mixing oils, you're not having to squeeze stuff out all the time and put it on palette paper and then mix with a palette knife, and like it's not it's very neat. And so that helps me a lot.
Right.
So as long as somebody's there to literally just hand me my stuff, then I'm good. Um, the only thing, sometimes I need the water changed. That's it.
Right.
I mean, it's not, yeah, it's good. And I have an aide with me a lot, like most of the day. And so it's not like I can't say, go in the other room and get this,
Right.
off the shelf or whatever. So for me, I mean, that's solved like that. Um, I'm actually trying to teach one of my dogs to do that, but
Right.
far we haven't gotten very far yet. Um, but but yeah, so for me, I mean that part is not as big of a deal. I just need things compact. So like I don't have a lot of extra accommodations on my computer. Like I don't have, voice recognition or any of that kind of stuff because first of all, it never understands me. It always screws up. It slows me down. Like I can type faster than that.
Right.
Because typing I've been typing with one hand for my entire life and I can type pretty fast with
Right.
one hand you know, and I just need a laptop. Like it kind of has to be a laptop with a trackpad that is, because it's more compact. Um, and the screen is right there. It's easy for me to reach, and um, I would not be able to handle a desktop well. That would not go well for me at all. But yeah, but otherwise, I mean, I don't really have a lot of that issue.
Right.
Um,
But which is
yeah,
your favorite, Catherine? I mean, are you more into the writing or the
no,
art, or is there a bit of a
no,
balance? No.
definitely not into writing. No,
Right.
I mostly split my time between um, painting and graphic design.
Right.
And the reason, actually, I just posted a blog about this today. The reason I am a graphic designer, I mean, I like it. Don't get me wrong, I like it. But the reason I went into graphic design instead of fine art is because it is it is really hard to make it as a fine artist.
Right.
I mean, monetarily, it's really, really hard
And why is that?
because people don't want to buy it. And you have to put out so much art. For every one painting you sell, there's probably 10 you haven't.
Right.
You
Okay.
know, so and you have to invest a lot of money into it and a lot of time. For me, when I want to sell a painting, it needs to be framed. That's
Right.
expensive. Um, and plus the materials and all that. So it physically, I am not able to put out enough to make it as a fine artist alone. However, I decided to get my degree in graphic design, and that works because I have clients that I do branding packages for and logos and social media management and marketing material and all kinds of stuff. And that works. I can combine the two and make it work.
And the time needed for this, I mean, you mentioned there, like, it takes, a bit of money and a bit of time. So what time, how long are we talking about?
For which,
For both?
well, I mean, it depends on the project. Paintings, I mean, an average pet portrait, if I was going to do an 8 by 10, let's just say an 8 by 10 pet portrait, usually about 3 days for
Okay.
me. Usually, give or take, depending on the animal and the background and all that. Um, God, I had one recently. This dog, the dog itself was fine. That was no big deal. But the lady had the dog dressed in a cable knit sweater. Do you know how hard it is to paint cable knit?
I have
Oh
no
my
idea. You're going to tell me anyway.
God, it was really hard. And that one took an extra day. But
Right.
anyway, um, normally that doesn't happen. Uh, um, but yeah, so 3-ish days. And then the design, it really, I mean, because those projects vary so much. I mean, some people I do their monthly social media. I manage their monthly. So it's, 4 to 10 hours a month. Sometimes it's even more than that. Sometimes it's 20 to 30 hours a month. It just depends on how often they're posting and what types of posts they're doing and how involved it is. I have like there's a festival coming up next week here that I do all of their stuff. Like I don't do their social media, but I do all of their banners and their signage and their brochures and flyers and posters and all that stuff. And so I mean, that has taken a couple weeks. I mean, it just depends on what it is. Usually, I just charge hourly for that, and it is what it is.
So where are you hoping this is going to all take? I mean, what's the focus for the future? I mean, have you
I
any
mean,
further dreams and
I
goals?
ideally, I mean, first of all, I would like to be able to make enough money that I'm not constantly stressing like
Right.
most people are right now. So that would be nice. Secondly, though, I would like to be able to just paint. I
Right.
mean, I like design, and it has helped me a lot in marketing myself. Um, and like I wrote a couple of books. Well, I technically illustrated one and wrote the other one, but I mean it has helped me in that I know how to lay out a book, um, and flyers and my own business cards and things like that. But I don't necessarily want to do it for other people forever.
Right.
I don't mind it. I mean, I'm okay at it, but I don't. It's not my favorite thing to do. You know, especially because a lot of design is it's. I mean, it's kind of boring. Like, it's like make this form look nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like make a painting. Draw a painting from scratch. So, but I have a ways to go before that happens. I've also started doing a good bit of public speaking, which I like being on podcasts and also to different business groups and women's groups and kids, schools, things like that. And I'm thinking that, I mean, ideally, between the art and that would be my end game.
Right.
But like I said, we're a ways away from that.
And what about then? You mentioned the public speaking. I mean, are you talking? Would you do this also via like Zoom, or does it have to
I
be in
have
person?
I like being in person. I mean, I don't have an issue either way. Of course, Zoom is convenient, right? Because for all you know, I'm wearing pajamas on my bottom half, right? I'm not, for the record, but
Say
you
nothing.
know, yeah, but Zoom is convenient, right? Because I don't have to figure out travel. I don't have to figure out, going somewhere and taking time off and all that. But it's nice to get out of the house sometimes. I live at home and I work at home, so to like go out and see people is kind of a nice thing sometimes. Like I just did a Rotary Club a couple weeks ago, and that was fun. Um, yeah, so
I think you'd be an excellent TEDx speaker. Have you ever looked at
yeah,
it?
I applied. I've not been called, but I applied. Um, you're welcome to recommend me if you would like to.
I
Maybe
would.
that would help.
I would definitely
But,
recommend. And if you let me know when we finish recording how I do that, I'll do that for you.
okay. Yeah,
That's
I did apply for it. So, and it says on like specifically on the application, once you apply, don't call back. Basically, like
okay. We
got your
call
application.
you. Right.
Yeah, like we've got your application. Don't check on it,
Right.
kind of thing. We'll
Okay.
call you if we want you.
All
So,
right. I'm
okay.
I'm being nosy, Catherine. I'm on your website, cacartnola.com, and you have art and design, you have your public speaking, as you mentioned, you have your shop, there's information about yourself. The interesting thing was I was having a little nosy earlier on, and obviously as an animal lover as well. I mean, you have some wonderful. I mean, you did all of these, did you?
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
did all. You have like you have a heron, you have a
Oh,
dragonfly,
no, I
black.
thought I'd steal some from somebody else and then make them mine.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
no, keep them
We'll say
all.
nothing. We'll say nothing. No,
Okay.
no. Your your secret's safe with me. No, but I mean,
Okay.
the detail is amazing. I mean, and is this just Jennifer your imagination? Just your artistic,
No, 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 no. I look at photos. I
right?
usually look at photos. Yeah. Now, I mean, I change photo. Like a lot of those. I mean, you're probably seeing the butterflies and the birds and stuff like that. I I'll look at a photo for the animal, but then I usually change a good bit of the background.
Right.
Too. But yeah, no, I'm not that good. No, I start with a photo that I
Right.
really like. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
you're very good.
Thank you.
No, no, you're very good. Irrelevant if it starts with a photo or not, you're very, very, very good.
Well, thank you.
Tell me this, Catherine, where, if any individual or person wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Through that website is perfect. There's a couple of contact forms. You can also, if you're interested in a pet portrait, you can send me an email. There's like a special section for pet portraits where you can upload a photo of your pet and it'll get to me. And yeah, there's a regular contact form. I'm also pretty active on Facebook and Instagram. So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. I'm technically on LinkedIn, but I'm really bad at it. So
Right.
you probably don't want to reach out to me there. Um, uh, yeah, so Facebook, Instagram, my website, yeah, all those places.
Well, if anybody from TEDx is out there,
I
you
know,
gotta get
I would appreciate that.
you gotta get
Yeah,
Catherine on. You do. And anybody, any companies, organizations, or anybody wants to do a Zoom call with Catherine, please
yeah,
get in touch.
yeah. Oh yeah, that would be great.
All this
That
I
would
would
be a lot of
say,
fun.
I,
I like meeting people too. Like I'm a generally very social person, so it's always fun. And I love this because like you're in Ireland. That's
yes,
so cool. I did a podcast with somebody a couple weeks ago who was in England.
right.
You
I'm
know, like
sorry. I'm sorry I had to speak to somebody in England. I'm sorry,
yeah,
Catherine.
he was really nice. I really liked him. He was very interesting. He actually is also an artist, and his podcast, his thing, is that he draws while he talks to his guests,
Oh,
and then
wow.
you get to see what he's come up with. at the end of the
And what did he
podcast.
come up with? Have you got it there beside you, or
Yeah, he drew one of my dogs. That I don't have it right here, but he drew one of my dogs that was walking around while we were talking.
right?
So yeah,
That's
it was
pretty
cool.
unique, isn't
Yeah, I was like, man, that's a good little shtick right there.
it?
That's right.
You have he has raised the bar right now. You know
That's right.
the English and the Irish now will be at loggerheads now.
Uh-oh.
We'll be
Uh-oh.
you've created tension again, Catherine, after many
Oh
years
no.
of
All
being
right, y'all still have the best whiskey, so it's okay.
you've created so much tension. Um, so all this let me say thanks so much to Katherine Klimitas. I'm going to make sure I pronounce it correctly. For joining me in the Wellbeing Crew podcast. The podcast will be released very shortly once the podcast has been approved. I'll put all the links in that you can contact Katherine directly. And as mentioned already, anybody's listening to this from TEDx or any organization out there that'd love to have Katherine on. She's a wonderful human being. Please get in touch. Thanks so much, Katherine.
All right, thank you.